going to go ahead and get started, friends. Thank you so much. Today, my guest for our Love in a Big World webinar is Dr. Kecia Ray. And Kecia and I have known each other for several years now, but will you give everyone a little idea about who you are and what you've done and what your focus is in education?
Sure. Well, it is true. We've known each other a very long time, even though we're both very young.
Yeah, that's right.
But I have been in education for a little over 30 years, and I started out as a science teacher in middle school and worked my way up to be principal and central office and superintendent. And now I work as a consultant, and I help school districts around the country with different strategies. Some are STEM focused, and some are, related to various and sundry other things. I also, two things that I think I did pretty cool was I supported the Vanderbilt Office of Science Outreach through the School of Medicine, and we did a lot of STEM programming. And then I helped design the technology in the Frisk Center for the Visual Arts, and we did a lot of STEM
awesome.
camps there too. So STEM technology, it's kind of my gig, my thing.
That's great. That's great. So what is the current state of STEM from your perspective?
Well, I'm a little bit of a purist. So I think that we started off really well with STEM in the 80s and 90s when there was an abundance of funding, and a lot of school districts were able to develop and implement really solid programs around STEM, and a lot of high schools were able to redesign their labs and get updated equipment and meet the new OSHA safety standards at the time. And that funding over time has kind of dwindled off. Under our previous presidential administration, some funding was reallocated back to STEM. And we saw an emphasis on STEM and innovation grants and things like that. And NSF had some funding. Under our current administration, some of that funding has waned. And it's just a little bit harder for school districts to maintain the same level of programming that they once did when they had a lot of funding. That said, there probably isn't one district in the country that hasn't some form of a STEM program, either in a high school setting, a middle school setting, or an after school and camp setting. And I work with a lot of them, and some of them they may have after school clubs that are focused on STEM, but they've got really rigorous science, math, and technology curricula within their core subjects. Some of them have really been strategic about thinking in the terms of STEM schools and designing entire school facilities around a STEM program model. And those are really awesome to look at. And then there's some schools that have created whole models, like High Tech High, that are really embracing STEM and kind of lifting it up to a school-wide model where everything is taught through the context of STEM. So I would say it's far and wide, the different models that are out there. I think, you know what, Tamara, I think one thing school districts struggle with is, and this is not just related to STEM, it's related to just the way that we're designed as school districts.
Right.
We've got Graham Sweeney on here, and he's a phenomenal superintendent. Superintendents are staying in their districts less and less. And when that change happens at the top, then priorities shift. And STEM is one of those priorities that can shift with time, especially the time of a tenured superintendent. So one superintendent could come in and be highly focused on STEM as an initiative and STEM programming. And, this is a way that we can attract kids in, and we can, get kids familiar with the sciences without being overwhelmed. And then another soup could come in and say, yeah, that's all well and good, but we need to do this. And then all of that is abandoned. So I think that's another challenge that districts really across the country are encountering.
So given all of that, given the challenges with funding, as well as in the challenges with leadership turnover, how do we design an effective STEM program that is long lasting?
Well, I think that you have to work with the leadership in schools and that kind of central office leadership level that is supporting schools.
Mm-hmm.
So you might say kind of the fulcrum of the district, right? The people that really can make the tipping point. You work with those folks and help them understand what programming can look like in their individual schools. And there's 8 essential elements of STEM programming that that I like to refer to, and it's written up in a journal article that I'm happy to share with your audience.
Oh, great.
But those elements are personalized learning, problem-based learning, rigorous learning, career technology, life skills, school community and belonging, external community and factors, and the staff, the staff and faculty that you have and the foundation of those faculty. And if you have all of those elements, then you can have a really phenomenal STEM program. And a lot of districts can have some of them, like they'll do personalized learning and they'll do problem-based learning and they'll want to have a rigorous curriculum, but in CTE, but they may not have that external connection to community partners, businesses in the area that are STEM-rich businesses. And that's really necessary because you have to have your kids, I mean, the whole reason STEM became a focus is because we had a shortage of people going into those industries, and we still have an incredible shortage today. So to have the connection with community and weigh in those external factors that the community bring to the table are incredibly important to consider when you're developing your program. And also the foundation of staff, right? We have a teacher shortage. A lot of people don't like to talk about it, but we have a teacher shortage in America, and it's a real challenge. And a lot of the people that we have teaching in high schools have picked another degree path. Many people don't realize this, but high school teachers get their bachelor's in a content area. And then they get an add-on to become a teacher. And for what we offer them in teaching land, I mean, you probably should have Malasaga like checked out for going into it, because it's not really worth the time or money to do it. So high school teachers are on a really tall pedestal to me because you've gone through 4 years to become a biologist and elected to teach kids about it. Think about that. So they can go out and get jobs anywhere in the universe that pay better and have better benefits than what we offer in public schools or private schools for that matter. And that's our competition. So that staff foundation, making sure that we have a really rich staff in our schools to shore up our kids when they're learning all of these foundational components of biology, chemistry, physics, all of those things, engineering, is lacking in some districts. I was talking to, a district this morning, and they said, we have no engineering teachers in the whole state. In the whole state. And this is a Midwestern state. And I said, well, I mean, can we, I'm trying to brainstorm, well, how can we get teachers into that district so that the kids can benefit? Because in this particular city, they have an engineering boom, but they have no teachers to teach in their schools so that they can teach the kids about engineering so they can fill the jobs that are being produced by the boom.
Pipeline.
Yeah. So that is a big challenge that, as a whole kind of system of education we have to overcome, is how do we recruit staff in that have this background? And one of the strategies that I've seen used very well is retirees. people who burned out on their career as a biologist or as an engineer, but they still want to give back. And we recruit those people into education, where on the front end, like Teach for America, for example, gets kind of young kids coming out of college with debt and says, hey, we got a deal for you. We're going to help you get out of debt if you teach school. Right. We need something on the back end. We need a program to be resurrected on the back end that can capture people that are either ready for retirement or ready for changing career and say, hey, we've got a deal for you. Come back in. We can get you into a state system, a state retirement. You can retire twice and really make it, kind of enticing to come in and teach with our kids. And when we do that, we have to think about these people have spent their careers in subject matter and have no idea how kids interact in large groups. They may know how they interact in groups of like 2 or 3. Right. You get 20 high schoolers together, that's a whole different phenomenon. And yelling and screaming probably isn't the best way to settle them down. So that's where it kind of interlaces with the social emotional learning. I truly do believe that STEM programs can lean into really kind of helping the social emotional learning programs get kicked off, because all the things that we do in STEM require you to have the components that are in the CASEL framework for social emotional.
Right. This is I have so many questions.
Okay.
Giving lots of information all at the same time. So let me back up just for a minute. When you talk about the shortage of we'll talk about the teacher shortage in a minute, but the shortage in subject matter areas, what subject matter areas are you seeing the shortage in the most? You mentioned engineering. Would that be the top, or are there others where you see the greatest?
Well, I would say it would be first engineering, then technology, then math and science.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Most technologists aren't going to go into a school field either. Those are 2 industries, engineering, technology, where you can make a lot of money anywhere else but teaching. Right. Science and math is very competitive, and there's a lot of jobs out there where you have a math background or a science background you can plug into, but a lot of those you really have to kind of work your way up. So there's a lot of levels, but in engineering and technology, it's like right in 60K out of college.
Given that, what ideas have you seen that work really well with that community connection to help bridge that gap?
Well, partnering with a company and having the company have release time where their employees can work with kids, with school kids. Then I might be a certified teacher, like I'm certified in physics, and I can't tell you how many times they want to make me teach chemistry and biology. And chemistry I could kind of get to. I'm like, okay, I got a little chemistry and physics, but I got no biology and physics. And because they think that I've got a particular background, science background, then they're going to plug me in to, dissect frogs. I'm like, that's not my thing. That's not what I've done. Mm-hmm. So I would rather be paired with someone. I can do the classroom management and pair me with a biologist who knows how to do that. And right. I can do the teaching of physics and chemistry classes, fine, but let somebody else teach biology and I'll coach them up, or I'll go in and be the disciplinarian in that classroom if you want to be the content specialist. I think we have to rethink models of teaching to really attend to our shortage in all subject areas. And mm-hmm. I think people who have been trained teachers can come in and manage a classroom very eloquently, and people who are content specialists can come in and do just that. They can share the content knowledge, and I can be like the instructional designer. And that's really what we do in college, right? In college, we have an instructional designer, and then, hypothetically, we don't have any discipline issues in college, but if you do, you just kind of put them out of college. They just go home. But you could still have, let's say, a classroom coach that can make sure that the kids know how to behave. You have an instructional designer that works with these content specialists, and the team can teach a group of kids and people rotate in and out. You could have one instructional designer for a whole K through 2 grade span. Now you've got coaches that could potentially be, you know, associate degree people even, or 4-year, but I don't know what the model needs to look like. And I probably shouldn't try to make it up on a webinar, but it needs to look different than it does today. And there are a lot of ways you can look at it in order to rethink what teaching and learning can look like in the US. I think, you know, bringing people in is a good avenue. Partnering with companies is a good avenue, and outreaching to your chamber of commerce or any other agency in the community that might be able to link you up is a way to start that conversation.
Okay, that's great. Again, I'm thinking so many things all at the same time, Kecia, because you're sharing such good information. So when you talk about the coaching, and you are proposing a very different model.
Right.
I also know that another model that you're a big proponent of is blended learning.
Yes.
And how you can use the technology as well as the live in-class interaction. So given those two ideas of bringing in these content specialists and the blended learning, tell us a little bit more about how those ideas can work together for STEM.
Well, I mean, I did that in 1993, if you can believe it, through video conferencing. And I had a classroom, a middle school classroom that I had set up, and I wanted my students to learn from experts. I didn't know. It was one of those situations where they were making me teach a little bit out of my area. And I said, I don't know anything about biology or microbiology, any of that. I married a guy, but he's not going to come into my classroom every day and teach kids. So I video conferenced them in on an ISDN line to a little bitty computer in the corner of my classroom. And anytime we would rotate, and a group of kids would go and they would learn from that expert. And then some would learn from me, and some would be on a computer system in the 90s. So like early 90s. Yes. So I can see that model very much at work today. And a lot of teachers that I talk with about that blended model are a little bit hesitant because they feel like when they lose, quote, control, then they're going to lose, like the discipline's going to go crazy. But I've never, ever, ever experienced that. When I experience crazy discipline is when I watched, when I was a principal, I saw teachers who just did not plan well. And I would go into their classroom and all chaos was breaking loose because they didn't have a plan. It doesn't matter what your plan is. If it's to bring an expert in, if it's to partner with another teacher, if it's to coach, teach with a virtual assistant or whatever. It doesn't matter what your plan is, or use software to offset your lack of, content knowledge. That doesn't matter. Just have a plan. Have a solid plan and work your plan. And when kids know you've got a plan and you've attended to all of their different needs in your plan, like this is for my kids who like to be in groups. These are my kids that like to work alone. These are for my kids who like to work in pairs. These are for my kids who are a little advanced. These are for my kids who need a little bit more remediation. When I plan for every group, then I don't have discipline issues because everyone knows what to do and their needs are being met. It's just like I got a 6-month-old kid. I love her dearly. If I can't figure out what her cry is, both of us are miserable. Right. But when I plan and I'm like, okay, she's either got a dirty diaper, she's hungry, she wants to go outside, I got to figure that out. And when I figure it out and I accommodate for it, smooth sailing. It doesn't change from 6 months to 60 years.
Right. So
we're all the same.
Exactly. So when you're talking about that planning, that again brings us back to the SEL component.
Yes.
And what you're talking about as far as classroom management. And can you talk a little more about that piece of it? Because one of the things, I loved your idea of recruiting the retirees and giving them another career. But my first thought when you said that was, how in the world are they going to relate to these middle schoolers or high schoolers, and are they going to lose control of their class? So can you talk a little bit more about two areas? One would be that classroom management or SEL piece for the teacher himself or herself, and then also, how do the STEM activities promote SEL for the students?
Well, I'm going to start with that question, because the way that STEM classrooms are set up typically are through projects or labs. Mm-hmm. And by the very nature of those two types of environments, you're going to have kids working in groups.
Yes.
Of some sort. They could be pairs, they could be, groups of, large groups, whatever. They're going to be working together. And what SEL does is it promotes all the skills necessary to work with another human being.
Yes.
And it doesn't matter the age of that human being. That human being can be 2 years old, it could be 10 years old, it could be the same age as I am, or it can be much older. But those skills help me become aware of how I interrelate with other people. One of the things that we hear back from industry when we talk to them from the STEM fields about, our kids going into their work environments is the lack of soft skills. Mm-hmm. And soft skills are nothing more than what you acquire when you're in a rich social emotional learning environment. Mm-hmm. Because you learn how to be aware of yourself and of your ability, and you learn how to manage your time and yourself and your speaking and your engagement with others. You learn how to be socially aware with your environment, with your group, with your peers, with your buddy. You learn how to relate to others and how to communicate with others. And you learn how to make really good decisions. Yes. When it's connected to that environment and beyond that environment. So to me, the STEM classroom is like the petri dish for SEL. It is the perfect environment for introducing the framework of SEL. And I think that when you marry them together, that combination will make a richer STEM environment too. Because one of the things that you have when you have a bunch of science people together of any kind, or technologists, I was on a call this morning, not even in a school, it was just a work call. And it was very tense because there was disagreement. And even though we disagreed in a small group, we had to take it to a bigger group, and there was intimidation when this group had to take it to the bigger group. Hmm. Right? And so I had no problem taking it to the bigger group and saying, yep, I was uncomfortable, and here's why I was uncomfortable. And this is what caused me to pause. And I'm thinking it's unfortunate that the other adults around this table who were part of that conversation didn't feel comfortable sharing out. Mm-hmm. Kids have that same challenge, right? Only worse, because a lot of times kids think they don't have a voice. So they're in a classroom and they're learning about all these science things, and they formulate an opinion about something. Like, well, that should have interacted, that's ammonia and that's sulfur, and those two things should have interacted, but they didn't. So, they start calling things into question, and it could escalate to an argument because there's different opinions, mm-hmm. right? But mm-hmm. the framework of SEL will help us understand how to manage it when we have different opinions. And how to kind of step back from the emotion. You have emotion, but you may not lead with the emotion, right? Let's lead with some facts. Like, did we see a reaction? Was it the kind of reaction we were anticipating? How old is the ammonia? How old is the sulfur? Oh, I didn't think about that. Where has it been stored? There's a lot of factors that influence a reaction, a chemical reaction. So when you start kind of questioning and asking and helping them make wiser decisions, then the next time they're in that environment, mm-hmm. even when they're adults like I was this morning, they're going to think, oh, okay, I need to, don't lead with emotion, lead with facts. Let me ask some questions. Let me get some facts, right? They're going to replicate it. Yes, and the more environments that they're in is as kids from middle and high school that give them those experiences in what I would call a sheltered environment, the more successful they're going to be when they get out to college and career and have to do it with no adults around.
Right. Because when they're in the classroom, there's very low resistance.
Right. Yeah.
And they can practice those skills and hone those skills. So when they get to college and career, when the risk is higher, consequences are greater.
They know how to manage it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And teachers sometimes are intimidated by that.
Yes.
It's
well,
true.
That was part of the question is I've seen that a lot too in the classroom where teachers want to have control. And so when you talk to them about the flipped classroom model or a blended learning model or the STEM design or even SEL and having students lead or students use their voice, they kind of get freaked out because it's not what they grew up with.
Right. Well, it's not, the typical teacher is going to kind of, the typical teacher will like to have control. I mean, they really do. They want to own their own classroom. They want to be responsible for the learning that's taking place, and they want to control the environment to the extent that they can. And you can tell who those teachers are by knowing what doors are closed and what doors are open on a hallway when you walk down it if you're a principal, right? Because you're like, what about that door is closed? Oh, they must not want anybody on the outside to know. Or it's a busy hallway. I mean, it could be that. But realistically, you as the principal are trying to keep the hallways quiet so they can keep it open and people can glance in and see what's going on. That's how I felt when I was principal. I think that teachers, turning over learning to kids is how kids are designed to be. Yes. If you look at young, early childhood kids, they're exploring, they're inquisitive, they're testing, they're trying to figure out what their environment is. When we get them into schools, we want to tell them what their environment is. And then when we release them into the universe again, they have to start figuring it out on their own. Right. We don't do them any favors by trying to take over their thinking while they're in school. What we need to try to do while they're in school is help them utilize that brain and ask questions and know and learn appropriate and inappropriate so that they can, when they get out into the world, they can navigate well. And we never, ever, ever want to take away their desire to be inquisitive and curious. Exactly. And a lot of times we do that by trying to control too much of the learning environment.
And I think, I'd love to hear your opinion on this before we go. I think one of the reasons kids are so drawn to YouTube and some of the other platforms that they're engaged with all the time is because they can learn so much. They get to choose the content. Yeah. They get to choose the time, but they're learning all the time. I mean, they're soaking it up like sponges.
Yeah. And they're telling us what they're learning. I'm like, where did you learn that? And my nephew's like, YouTube. I'm like, is everything on YouTube? He's like, pretty much. I'm like, you know how to filter that stuff, right? He's like, yeah. My librarian taught me. I'm like, go librarians. But I think kids want to learn what they want to learn when they want to learn it. That's the whole, I worked on the ESSA legislation. And a lot of what we tried to factor into that was personalizing learning. And that became its own thing. And people started, regulating it, so to speak. But the whole concept behind it was what we do we can do really, really well in schools is we can tailor learning to the learners. And if you think about the way you like to learn, and it always fascinates me when I do professional development and elementary teachers act exactly like elementary students. Middle school teachers act exactly like middle school students, and high school teachers act exactly like high school students. It doesn't matter the district or the part of the country. It's exactly the same. Yes. And I think that happens because they emulate the kids that they're with all the time, right? They start adopting characteristics. No teacher I've ever talked to enjoys sit me in a chair and talk to me for 6 hours on my PD day. I've never talked to one teacher that said, I really wish you could have lectured to me all day. But they all want variety. They want to pick what they want to learn, when they want to learn it, within a given span of time. And what I try to do is design those environments for teachers and then help them understand the value of them designing that kind of an environment for their classrooms.
That's great.
Yeah.
So, closing thoughts. Yes. Closing thoughts.
From me?
Yeah, from you.
I think that I think SEL is the core of fabulous instruction. And I think that if more districts can think about SEL in that way instead of an add-on, then it would be a lot easier to implement. Because for me, I would start with a STEM program and I'd say these are perfect marriages because you've got the environment already in STEM. Let's just incorporate the framework of SEL in these STEM classrooms, and let's see if our labs perform better, if our projects, have more results than what they have typically had. I think that marriage is a perfect marriage. And I think starting in a STEM classroom for your SEL implementation is probably a quick win.
Mm-hmm. I agree. And that's one of the things I talk with teachers about all the time is you're already doing SEL, but what we need to do is call it out more, be intentional and explicit. So kids are understanding the connection between when they're working in a group and how they're practicing cooperation, how they're learning those relationship skills. And so they can see that transfer as they hone those skills all along the way. So thank you so much for your time, Kecia. It's always good to be with you. And thank you to everyone who's joined us today. We will share resources with you in our post-webinar email. I'll get those from Kecia and share them out with all of you. Thank you so much. And we'll see you next time.
Thank you. Have a good day, everybody.
Bye-bye.